would think, okay, this is your dad.
Who again?
Clint. His name's Clint Eastwood.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I heard
that
him.
guy.
For more than 6 decades, Clint Eastwood has been one of Hollywood's most unshakable icons. From his breakthrough as the lone drifter in The Good, The Bad and the Ugly, to directing Oscar-winning dramas like Unforgiven and $1 Million Baby, Eastwood has built a reputation as the toughest man in the industry, an actor, director, and legend who always stood tall no matter what life threw his way. But behind that steely exterior, Eastwood's personal life has been filled with heartbreak, and now, shocking new details have emerged from none other than his own son. At 95 years old, Eastwood is facing one of the hardest chapters of his life. Just months ago, he lost his longtime partner Christina Sandera in a sudden and devastating way. Fans wondered, how could a man his age withstand such a crushing loss? Was Hollywood's ultimate survivor finally brought to his breaking point? In a rare and emotional moment, Clint's son Scott Eastwood has stepped forward to reveal the truth. His words paint a picture of both resilience and pain, reminding us that even legends are human. What Scott shared is not easy to hear. It's raw, it's heavy, and it changes how we see Clint Eastwood forever. Clint Eastwood has spent his life embodying strength. On screen, he was the gunslinger who never flinched, the cop who never backed down, and the director who took risks most Hollywood insiders thought would fail. But away from the spotlight, Eastwood's life has been far more fragile, and 2024 delivered a blow that even a man of his resilience could not ignore. In July of that year, Clint's longtime partner Christina Sandera passed away suddenly at just 61 years old. The cause of death, later revealed in official reports, was linked to cardiac arrhythmia and atherosclerotic coronary artery disease. In simple terms, her heart failed without warning. For Eastwood, the loss was devastating. Christina was not just a partner. She had been by his side for a decade, offering him stability and companionship at a stage in life when many Hollywood veterans find themselves alone. Christina Sandera wasn't a household name like Clint, and that's how she preferred it. Before meeting Eastwood, she worked quietly as a restaurant hostess, and even after becoming part of his world, she remained largely private. For fans, her presence was often noted only in brief appearances at red carpet events or charity galas. But to Clint, she represented something far deeper, a normalcy that Hollywood rarely allows. Friends close to the couple described their bond as surprisingly down-to-earth. They lived quietly, away from the chaos of Los Angeles, splitting their time between Clint's homes in Carmel and other retreats where privacy could be maintained. When Christina died, Clint was said to be crushed but stoic. Those who know him remarked that he retreated into silence, processing grief in his own way. Unlike many stars who post tributes on social media or give interviews, Eastwood said almost nothing publicly. Instead, it was his son, Scott Eastwood, who stepped forward months later to provide an update on his father's state of mind. And what he revealed was both comforting and heartbreaking. Scott described his father as a survivor, a trooper, a man who refuses to crumble even in the face of unimaginable loss. He pointed out that Clint's ability to endure comes from his early life. Born during the Great Depression, raised during World War II, Eastwood was shaped by hardship from the beginning. In Scott's words, Clint grew up in a world where you don't complain, you don't whine, you just do. But even with that toughness, losing Christina was different. She was not just a partner, but a source of quiet happiness in his final decades. Sources close to the family suggested that Clint found her presence soothing, a counterbalance to the intensity of his long career and the chaos of his complicated personal life. Without her, there is now an emptiness that no work, no accolades, and no Hollywood legacy can fill. What makes this even harder is Eastwood's age. At 95, he no longer has the same distractions that once kept him moving forward. No packed directing schedules, no endless film shoots. The silence is heavier now, and grief lingers longer. Some insiders say he has turned more inward, spending time with his children and grandchildren, cherishing family moments while coping with Christina's absence. For the public, it's difficult to reconcile this private pain with the tough-as-nails image Eastwood has carried for decades. But Scott's words made one thing clear. While Clint is surviving, he is also hurting. He is human, and yet this loss is only part of the story. To understand how Eastwood manages such grief at 95, we need to look back at the life experiences that made him into the man he is today, the struggles, the upbringing, and the resilience forged long before Hollywood fame ever arrived. To understand how Clint Eastwood can endure the crushing loss of his longtime partner at 95, we have to rewind the clock nearly a century. Clint's son Scott put it best when he explained that his father was shaped by a different kind of world, one where survival meant resilience, and resilience became second nature. Born in San Francisco in 1930, Eastwood's childhood was far from the glamorous Hollywood lifestyle he would one day embody. His family lived through the darkest years of the Great Depression, a time when jobs were scarce and families struggled to keep food on the table. Clint's father, Clinton Eastwood Sr., worked odd jobs and moved the family frequently in search of opportunities. This instability meant that Clint grew up without the security many children take for granted. By the time he was a teenager, he had lived in more than a dozen towns, adapting constantly to new environments. From these early years, Clint absorbed one key lesson: life doesn't promise comfort. You work, you endure, and you push forward regardless of the obstacles. This philosophy would later define his Hollywood career and personal life. World War II was another shaping force. Clint was a teenager when the war consumed the globe, and although he was too young to serve at first, the shadow of global conflict loomed large over his generation. Later, he was drafted into the Army during the Korean War, serving as a swimming instructor at Fort Ord in California. It wasn't glamorous duty, but it exposed him to the discipline, grit, and toughness that military life demanded. Even outside the military, Eastwood's survival instincts were tested. In one famous incident, he survived a plane crash in 1951 when the aircraft he was aboard ran out of fuel and was forced to ditch in the Pacific Ocean near Point Reyes. Clint swam nearly 3 miles to shore through freezing waters. That ordeal left an indelible mark. Survival wasn't optional, it was instinct. This early crucible of hardship and near-death experiences carved out the stoic character that later audiences saw on screen. When Scott Eastwood recently described his father as a survivor, a trooper, he wasn't exaggerating. Clint had already survived poverty, war, and even death itself long before Hollywood discovered him. By the time Clint entered the entertainment industry in the 1950s, he was already tougher than most men in the room. He wasn't handed fame on a silver platter. He endured years of rejection, small parts, and frustration before finally finding success on the television series Rawhide. Even then, his big breakthrough didn't come until Sergio Leone cast him as the man with no name in the spaghetti westerns of the 1960s. These roles resonated precisely because Clint didn't need to fake toughness. It was already in his bones. Off-screen, however, this same resilience sometimes came across as emotional distance. He wasn't one to openly discuss pain or vulnerability. That approach may have worked in the hard-edged world of Hollywood, but it also meant that grief, when it came, was often carried silently. Scott's recent comments about his father confirm this. Clint doesn't dwell on loss publicly. He shoulders it quietly, because that's the only way he knows how to move forward. It's this same unshakable spirit that allows him to endure the loss of Christina Sandera today. While most men at 95 might crumble under such tragedy, Clint is drawing on nearly a century of hardship-honed resilience. Still, as Scott admitted, surviving doesn't mean he isn't hurting. It means he refuses to let that pain destroy him. But as inspiring as that toughness may be, it also raises another question. What is life really like for Clint now, in the aftermath of Christina's passing? How is he spending his days, and what truths about his health and future has his son revealed? For the outside world, Scott Eastwood seemed to have it all: the looks, the Hollywood pedigree, and the opportunities most aspiring actors could only dream of. But behind the carefully managed image, Scott's journey was far more difficult than people realized. New details released in recent reports have shed light on just how heavy the Eastwood name became for him. Carrying the burden of being Clint Eastwood's, Son came with expectations so high that even his own achievements often felt overshadowed. Industry insiders have revealed that Scott often fought a silent battle to prove he was more than just Clint's kid. Casting directors admitted off the record that while his name opened doors, it also closed them, as some assumed he would never measure up to his father's legacy. That constant comparison was exhausting, and those close to Scott noticed how it chipped away at his confidence over the years. He wanted success on his own terms, but Hollywood rarely allowed him that chance. The pressure didn't stop at his career. In his personal life, Scott's relationships reportedly grew strained as he struggled with the weight of fame. Friends and former partners described him as someone who, beneath the charm, often carried an unshakable sadness. He tried to present himself as resilient, but insiders now claim that he battled moments of doubt, regret, and even isolation. These struggles, kept private for so long, are only now coming to light with the latest revelations. Perhaps the most heartbreaking part is how Scott's story mirrors that of many Hollywood children born into fame. The bright lights conceal the shadows, and while audiences saw a rising star, those close to him knew he was walking a fine line between success and collapse. The newest information paints a sobering picture. Scott Eastwood's life has not been the glamorous ride many imagined, but one marked by inner battles that continue to define him. The latest revelations about Scott Eastwood have left fans stunned, and for many, deeply heartbroken. For years, he carried the charm of his father's rugged looks, a promising Hollywood career, and the kind of star power that made audiences believe he was destined to be the next big name of his generation. But behind the polished magazine covers and blockbuster appearances, a far more complicated story was unfolding. And now, with these new details revealed, we are finally beginning to understand the full weight Scott has been carrying. For decades, Clint Eastwood has been celebrated as the epitome of strength, grit, and perseverance. But being the son of such a towering figure comes with pressures most of us cannot imagine. Sources close to Scott have admitted that while he always admired his father, their relationship has been strained at times. Clint was a larger-than-life figure in the film world, but in his personal life, he wasn't always around. Scott has publicly acknowledged that he spent a good portion of his childhood being raised primarily by his mother, and while Clint did play a role later, those early absences left lasting scars. The result? Scott grew up constantly feeling like he needed to prove himself, not just to Hollywood, but also to the man whose shadow he could never escape. Imagine the weight of always being compared to a father who wasn't just famous, but legendary. Every audition, every role, every interview carried an unspoken comparison. Is he as good as Clint? Those expectations created a burden so heavy that even his most successful films couldn't ease the pressure. But what's truly shocking about these latest details is how much Scott has been struggling behind closed doors. Insiders claim that while his public image has always been one of confidence and charm, privately he's wrestled with profound loneliness. Failed relationships have left him questioning his worth, and the demands of the film industry have only magnified his struggles. There are whispers that at one point, Scott even considered stepping away from Hollywood entirely, retreating to a quieter, more private life, far removed from the red carpets and flashing cameras. The bad news is that his battles are not just professional, but deeply personal. Reports suggest that Scott has carried unresolved grief for years, particularly connected to the tragic loss of his former girlfriend, Jewel Brangman, who died in a devastating car accident in 2014. The loss left him shattered, and although he rarely speaks about it publicly, those who know him well confirm that it changed him forever. It was a reminder that even someone with fame, fortune, and opportunity is still just as vulnerable to heartbreak as the rest of us. The recent revelations also highlight how deeply Scott struggles with identity. While he's grateful for the opportunities he's had, he often feels like Hollywood sees him as Clint's son, rather than an artist in his own right. That identity crisis has haunted him for years, and insiders say it has affected not just his career choices, but also his personal sense of fulfillment. This need to prove himself has at times led to burnout, leaving him feeling like he's chasing a version of success he may never fully achieve. Yet despite all of this, what makes Scott's story so moving is his quiet resilience. Friends close to him reveal that he has not given up. He still dreams of carving out a career that reflects who he is, not just the legacy of his last name. He has been focusing more on projects that bring him joy rather than chasing Hollywood's idea of success. In some ways, this shift could be the most important step of his journey. For fans, however, these new details feel like a heartbreaking revelation. To think that Scott Eastwood, who seemed to have everything, has been carrying such heavy burdens is a reminder of how deceptive appearances can be. The Hollywood world thrives on glitz and glamour, but beneath the surface are human beings fighting their own battles. Often in silence, as Scott enters this new phase of life, the truth is clear. He is no longer just Clint Eastwood's son, nor is he simply a Hollywood actor chasing fame. He is a man confronting his demons, making peace with his past, and seeking a future where he can finally live on his own terms. Whether he remains in Hollywood or steps away from the spotlight, Scott's story is one of pain, resilience, and the search for identity. The truth that has now been revealed isn't just about Scott. It's a reminder of the human cost behind every public figure we admire. And while the details may feel shocking, they also bring us closer to understanding the man behind the name, the smile, and the Hollywood roles. Scott Eastwood's journey may not be the fairy tale fans once imagined, but it is real, raw, and deeply human. And perhaps that makes his story even more powerful.